Hosted by you/Sammy Yasosa. My fiance and I are 29. My fiance, best man, groomsmen, and I have known each other since we were kids. We met collectively between 6th and 7th grade and have been part of the same friend group ever since. The group has grown and shrunk over the years, but a small core of us has remained extremely close. Recently, my fiance's best man, Jason, 30M, has been making jokes when we're hanging out about the two of us dating, and these have now escalated. Admittedly, when I met Jason in 6th grade, I had the biggest crush on him, and everyone knew. I was much taller than average for a girl at that age, and he was one of 2 guys in the entire school as tall as me. But that's where the story ends. I had one hell of an awkward phase in middle school, and he made it very clear from the start that he was not interested. Post-awkward phase, as friends and adults, it was something we constantly joked about, but never seriously, since everything between us had always been platonic. This joke about him rejecting me has recently turned into claims that he dated me first whenever my fiancé and I are around. Despite the inaccuracy and the fact that it's being brought up more often, everything has remained pretty lighthearted in context, and while it's annoying, it's something I've been able to brush off or quickly rebut. This escalated over the weekend when 2 of my fiancé's groomsmen were hanging out with my fiancé and me. The wedding was brought up, and after exchanging a concerned look, they mentioned something had happened with Jason that they thought we should know about. Apparently, Jason had been telling them stories he was considering for his best man speech, with the main one centering around how I had been shared around and had made my way through the entire friend group. While they kept what was explicitly said fairly vague out of respect for me, they made it clear that Jason had crossed the line and insinuated I had slept with the entire group attending the wedding. They made it very clear to Jason that he could not say anything like this in his speech or toast. Jason responded with an "I know," stating that I had already made it clear my maid of honor would be proofreading all speeches prior to the wedding, so he wouldn't be able to get away with it anyway. However, he ended the conversation by saying something along the lines of "but what if I could," leaving the possibility open. Of all the groomsmen in the party, 6 including Jason, these 2 were the only ones in the core friend group, and the only ones with whom I had any sort of history that could potentially be notable. It was all prior to high school and very innocent. One was my first movie date, where our parents had to drop each of us off because we couldn't drive and picked us up afterward. The other was the classic first 6-month relationship in middle school, where it took 6 weeks to muster enough courage to hug each other between classes in the hallway. Sure, we made out, and very middle school level things happened. But we've all laughed about this for over a decade. I wasn't the only girl in this larger friend group, and throughout the years, this sort of thing happened fairly often. Since we grew up in a smaller area, overlap like this was common in every group, even more so as we went through high school. My fiancé is the only one I have seriously dated or had any sort of intimate relationship with in this friend group. We had an on-again off-again relationship throughout high school that ended for a while when I moved out of state for college, but we remained close friends and eventually reconnected when I moved back in 2019. We started dating in 2021 and engaged in 2023. He's the only one I've ever slept with, etc., which makes this situation even more odd and off-putting. Jason and I have been close friends since high school. When my fiancé was in a toxic relationship that isolated him from Jason after I had left for college, Jason would reach out to me for advice on school, girls, relationships, and more. He had always been our number one supporter, advocating for my fiancé and me to reconcile our relationship throughout college and into adulthood. He even took a bit of credit and would throw around an "I told you so" here and there when we eventually reconnected. I'm not sure how to handle this. I could write an additional post about how frustrated, confused, wronged, and uncomfortable I feel, all of which I plan to discuss in more detail with my fiancé after reflecting on the issue a bit longer. We've all talked about it and recognized that the way Jason is framing things is wrong, but my fiancé and the groomsmen are able to brush it off in a way that I feel I can't. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Edit. My fiancé and I aren't getting married until the end of next summer, so most of the conversations about toasts and speeches have been more theoretical, except that a few people have asked for the opportunity to give a toast, including the best man. We have loosely shared this information in the Save the Dates, on the website, and other materials. My fiancé and the best man have been best friends since kindergarten. They were neighbors and inseparable until they each went their own way for college. My fiancé's parents basically raised him alongside my fiancé. Jason has always strictly expressed only platonic feelings for me. Even when both of us were single or alone together, we have only ever acted as friends since my embarrassing early middle school crush. Update 2 days later. First, I want to thank those who were clear and honest about how alarming the situation was from their perspective. When I posted, I was still processing various feelings about the matter, and I still am, which not only limited my ability to fully consider the situation from a different perspective but also left me in a state of paralysis regarding what to do next, both in the short and long term. Given the nature of the situation, a lot of historical context was omitted to avoid making the original post too lengthy. I have done my best to include the most relevant context based on the original comments in my update below. Since posting, I have spoken in further detail with both my fiancé and one of the other groomsmen involved. I also confided in my maid of honor to gain an additional perspective outside of this specific friend group. After these conversations and reading through all the comments on the original post, I've come to realize the significance of a few key details. 1. Jason has a deep-rooted superiority complex. He always has, and it's something many in our friend group have become accustomed to. He has always been the type who seemed to believe he was the standout among his friends, whether through education, athletics, his career, or with women. 2. Jason has also always been a bit egocentric, and his lack of accountability or consequences for his actions has been growing for some time now. Despite it almost always being unintentional, he is often oblivious to the inconveniences and harm he causes others, as long as it benefits his personal ego. 3. This situation is about jealousy from a few different angles, but not specifically about me. When looking at the full picture, this escalation feels like a continued attempt to knock my fiancé down for reaching the next stage in life. Whether that's because my fiancé has reached it before him or has moved on without him, I cannot say for sure. 4. Jason's issues with misogyny have also been escalating alongside everything else. His lack of respect for the women he has dated seems to have worsened. Much of the personal tension between him and me recently stems from his views on women, which have veered into more disrespectful territory, alluding to a growing belief that, due to their gender alone, women are inferior. And 5. The good friend he was to me over the years, kind, supportive, never overstepping boundaries, and always there when needed, can exist alongside this other side of him. These things are not mutually exclusive. Life happens, and people grow, sometimes in opposite directions. So, I spoke in depth with one of the groomsmen to gain further transparency about the situation and what was explicitly said. He acknowledged that the conversation initially centered around their excitement for the wedding, with Jason clearly stating that he wanted to give my fiancé and me the best wedding and experience possible. The conversation evolved, and Jason mentioned looking for icebreakers for his speech/toast, eventually bouncing around a variety of distasteful jokes that focused more on my fiancé than anything else. Then, the idea was proposed about explicitly stating that my being passed around the friend group was how they had all remained relatively close since middle school and high school. Jason was immediately shut down by the other groomsmen, who told him to know his audience and recognize that he was openly alluding to things that were untrue and could have an extremely negative impact on me personally. The conversation stopped shortly after this, and the groomsmen, unaware of how this issue had been escalating, chalked it up to a one-off situation with Jason acting full of himself in the moment. My fiancé and I are the first of our cohort to get married and have a full-blown wedding with a ceremony and reception. These comments did not start escalating until after our engagement roughly 1 year ago, following Jason's breakup with his long-term girlfriend. Jason has never made comments like this to me or my fiancé privately, or when it is just the three of us together. Any scenario where this has been an issue has involved others, and mostly people who are not part of our middle school cohort. This solidified the above points as the main factors behind why Jason acted this way, from my perspective. So, what next? As mentioned in my original post, I spoke with my fiancé in detail about the situation and how I was feeling. When all of this was brought to our attention a few days ago, I brushed it off more than I probably should have in an attempt to protect myself in the moment. I don't blame my fiancé for not having any immediate or strong reaction at the time, because I had avoided one myself. I think it's important to note that Jason is not a day-to-day presence in our lives. While he frequently travels for work that brings him to our area, we live in different states. He hasn't lived in the same area as my fiancé or me since high school. Much of this shift in his personality has happened over the last few years. I recognize that this doesn't excuse the lack of accountability on our part, but I felt it was important context to clarify that this wasn't something observed and ignored daily, but rather something that has gradually been recognized over time, as we see him maybe 4 times a year at most. My fiancé was extremely open during our conversation and immediately suggested having a talk with Jason, but admitted that he hadn't viewed this as anything more than Jason just being Jason and that he was all talk. At that point, we had only discussed how Jason had continually escalated the situation and how uncomfortable I had become as a result. The lack of accountability my fiancé had taken for Jason's actions definitely hurt, but then I recalled a commenter who asked if I still considered Jason a friend because he actually was, or simply because that's how it has always been. To sum up what turned into a lengthier and much more productive conversation with my fiancé, I told him that while I recognized his friendship with Jason had always been a part of his life, I no longer wanted to be friends with him after this. I pointed out to my fiancé that, while the situation explicitly targeted me and attacked the integrity and character of a 12-year-old girl, every action or use of the scenario was actually aimed at him, to invalidate his accomplishments, like getting married, or to make him seem less than. I told my fiancé that it was up to him how he handles his conversation with Jason, But regardless, the disrespect Jason had shown me was a clear statement of what he thought of our personal friendship. I firmly believe it's not my place to dictate how my fiancé handles his own relationship with Jason. All of this was deeply taken to heart, and it was clear that my fiancé started coming to his own realizations as the conversation progressed. He acknowledged that if the roles were reversed, or if one of my bridesmaids had slandered him in any way, he would be firmly advocating for me to reevaluate my friendship with them. My fiancé asked for a few days to process the information and reflect on what he wants to say to Jason. He asked if it would be acceptable to mention that I no longer wanted to be friends with Jason personally, and I said yes. I was clear that if Jason wanted to talk with me after their conversation, it would need to involve the three of us, and not be a one-on-one discussion. I'm still evaluating how to approach the speeches and toasts at our wedding. For now, I reserve the right, with my fiancé's agreement, to omit Jason from giving a speech and to have my fiancé choose another groomsman to speak in his place, potentially canceling the speeches and toasts altogether. If Jason is allowed to give a toast, we also agreed to instruct the DJ to cut the mic if necessary. There is still plenty of time for the situation to develop and for potential future updates, but I want to again thank those who emphasized the seriousness of this issue, gave their honest input and advice on how to handle it, and provided perspective on what they believe should be done next. When I originally posted, I was still in a state of shock, trying to process the situation as it had unfolded. Your responses constructively pushed me into the reality of what was happening and helped me better understand what I was feeling. Second update 6 months later. I'm considering canceling our wedding and calling off our engagement over a pizza. This is going to be kind of long, sorry. While the drama surrounding my fiancé's best man has simmered, the deeper issues around the lack of support have not. Apologies in advance for this not being centered around my fiancé's best man. Honestly, not much has changed. A conversation between them was had, most of which involved my fiancé reassuring Jason that things would blow over and accommodating Jason's claim that it was only a joke. While my fiancé acknowledged that what was said was wrong, the conversation wasn't about setting boundaries. I eventually had to have my own conversation with Jason, during which my fiancé stood silently in the room. I reached my breaking point 2 weeks ago. Following everything with his best man and a few other challenges we've been facing, I've spent the past 6 months trying to put my best foot forward. I sought out therapy to address the lack of support and the anxiety I was feeling, and I've made intentional efforts to work on our relationship to ensure we were in a stronger place before committing to each other. In May, after some unexpected and startling health concerns that required an emergency room visit, my fiancé confessed to secretly canceling his health insurance in January without discussing it with me or telling me. When I asked him why, he blamed the cost of the wedding, saying it was too expensive and that he wanted to save the $150 a month. He took no accountability for his actions beyond offering an apology. I have a small amount of experience in accounting and have budgeted the wedding down to the last dollar. This includes considerations for inflation and other potential costs. In total, from the smallest decoration to the cost of the marriage certificate, everything comes to around $22,000, all of which I have strategically budgeted for throughout our 2-year engagement. My parents have generously contributed $14,000 to help with the expenses, and I have personally taken on the cost of my dress, wedding bands, and a slightly larger portion of the vendors. To put it simply, while it may not be as much as others, we have privilege. Not only was there no need for this cancellation, but I have yet to see any of that additional support for expenses. In response, I took it upon myself to cover more of the costs and pursued a part-time job on top of my full-time position, which earns roughly $70,000 a year. While it's not by a large margin, I do earn more than him individually, and I have greater responsibilities in my daily work life, with longer hours and a significant amount of expected travel as a result. The decision to take on a part-time role wasn't one of want, but of a desire to ease the burden he was feeling. I started a role reviewing blogs, essays, resumes, and other forms of writing in July, and our relationship quickly unraveled. Because I commute, I typically arrive home 3 hours after my fiancé. Once home, I would immediately hop on my laptop and review writings for the next 2 hours or so to stay on top of my quota. I tried my best to create a routine so we could have intentional time together once I finished each night. This was met with cold shoulders, frustration, and a lack of consideration for my exhaustion and strain over the course of months. Anytime I asked him to choose a show to watch or decide on dinner, he usually cooks because I get home much later. I was met with scoffs and accusations that I no longer cared about tending to our relationship. I tried countless times to address his frustrations, but I was either shut out or cornered in circular arguments about my priorities. 2 weeks ago, I was scheduled to travel to Atlanta for my full-time position during Hurricane Helene. In a matter of 12 hours, my afternoon flight for the next day was changed to one leaving at 5 a.m., giving me ample time to shelter in place before the storm arrived. I rushed home to finish packing and prepare for the drive, which was over an hour to the airport. I planned to stay at a hotel nearby for added flexibility in case there were issues with my early travel the next morning. After arriving home, I immediately hopped in the shower and asked my fiancé to order dinner so we could have one last meal together. While I was in the shower, he offered to order a hot honey, jalapeno, and pineapple pizza from a new place we'd been wanting to try. Normally, I would have been happy to try it. However, I don't like jalapenos the same way some people don't like cilantro, and I'm strongly against pineapple on pizza, something that's come up multiple times during our relationship. While I'm fine with spice, the idea of having that pizza with the travel stress and early start I had the next day made me hesitant. I calmly asked if there was another option for tonight and suggested we try that specific pizza when I got back, expressing my concerns over my nerves. This received a frustrated scoff and a sarcastic response, "What then, just cheese?" I explained that any other topping combination would work and restated my concerns. He walked out of the bathroom without responding, and I finished my shower. The pizza was never ordered, no food was ordered. As soon as I got out of the shower, I followed up, asking if there was another option he wanted or another place to consider, and I received a prompt no. While I finished getting ready, I asked again if anything had been ordered, and again the answer was no. I finally snapped, begging and demanding him to order the hot honey pizza because I was out of time. He accused me of making him feel like he was forcing me into the decision, but after some back and forth, the pizza was finally ordered. The mood immediately shifted, and everything felt peaceful, warm, and loving at home until I left. Yet, I cried the entire hour and 15-minute drive to the airport hotel. I cried the entire next day, throughout the storm in Atlanta, and the day after. Following a lack of sleep, stress, and intense emotions, I had a complete mental breakdown, realizing I couldn't live like this anymore. I called my fiancé and poured out every frustration, emotion, and feeling, though I admit it probably wasn't presented in the best way, but none of it was well received. In the 2 weeks since, despite many attempts, our conversations have gone nowhere, with only ultimatums being offered for me to make. I've proposed countless alternatives that focus on us working on ourselves and our relationship over the next few months, but he is only seeking a definitive answer about whether or not we will be getting married next summer. He's made it clear that this decision must be made by the end of October. At this point, I don't see how I can possibly gain the confidence to commit to him by next summer. For the sake of not doubling the length of this post, I'll leave it at this for now. All of this is being discussed with my therapist. At this time, he has chosen not to pursue counseling with me, despite my asking and advocating for it. Many words have been exchanged, and I am trying. But I'm starting to second guess and waver on just how far love can get me through all of this.